Albert Christian and his wife Rita were not the spontaneous thrill seeker types. They were a married couple in their 60s, living a normal life in British Columbia. Albert worked in the automotive industry as a salesman, specializing in reconditioning products used to restore and maintain vehicles. They were traveling to Las Vegas in March of 2011, heading to a trade show. It was not an unusual trip for them. They were experienced on the road, comfortable with long drives, and, like so many people at the time, they relied on their GPS to guide the way. It was meant to make things easier, faster, more efficient. Instead, it led them somewhere no one was meant to go. The road looked harmless at first, just another stretch of open highway cutting through the vast emptiness of the American West. The kind of road that promises distance, movement, and eventually arrival. For Albert and Rita, it was supposed to be the final leg of a long journey. At some point along their route, the GPS suggested an alternate path, a shortcut that would shave time off the drive compared to the main highways. On the screen, it appeared simple, a thin line stretching through a remote section of northern Nevada, connecting one road to another. It didn't come with warnings. It didn't explain that the road ahead wasn't maintained, that it climbed into higher elevations, or that early spring conditions could make it nearly impassable. To them, it looked like just another rural road, so they followed it. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The paved highway eventually gave way to gravel and then gravel to dirt. The further they drove, the quieter it became. The landscape opened into wide stretches of empty terrain, with distant mountains rising along the horizon. There were no other vehicles, no houses, no signs of life, just the road ahead and the belief that it would eventually reconnect with something more familiar. It's easy, in moments like this, to convince yourself that everything is fine, that the GPS knows what it's doing, that the road will improve just a few miles ahead. So they kept going. But the road didn't improve. It got worse. As they climbed into higher elevations near the Idaho-Nevada border, patches of snow lingered in shaded areas, and the dirt beneath their tires softened into mud. The van began to struggle for traction. Tires slipped and spun, fighting against the unstable ground. Every attempt to push forward only made things more difficult. And then, eventually, the inevitable happened. The van became stuck. At that moment, the situation shifted from inconvenience to danger. They were no longer just delayed, they were stranded. They were in a remote, mountainous area with little to no traffic, especially during that time of year. There was no cell service, no easy way to call for help. The road behind them was just as uncertain as the one ahead. So they did what most people would do. They tried to free the vehicle. They shifted weight, attempted to maneuver, and tried to gain traction. But the more they tried, the deeper the van settled into the mud and snow. Eventually, it became clear. They weren't going anywhere. So they made a decision. They would wait. Inside the van, they had limited supplies, some trail mix, a small amount of food, and basic items for the trip. It wasn't much, but it was something. Waiting made sense. In survival situations, staying with your vehicle is often the safest choice. It provides shelter from the elements. It is easier for rescuers to spot. It gives you a fixed location. If someone came looking, the van would be far more visible than a person on foot. So they stayed, rationing what little food they had and trying to conserve energy as temperatures dropped at night. But as the days passed, reality began to settle in. No one was coming. After about 3 days, Albert made a decision that would define everything that followed. He would leave. It's one of the hardest choices a person can make in the wild: stay and risk never being found, or leave and risk becoming lost. Albert believed he could find help. Somewhere beyond the mountains, there had to be a road, a town, something. He gathered what little he could carry and told Rita he would return. Then he walked away, and that was the last time she would ever see him. Rita stayed behind, alone in the van, surrounded by miles of wilderness. At first, she held on to hope. Albert would reach help. He would find someone. He would come back. But as the days stretched into a week and then beyond, that hope became harder to hold on to. Food ran out quickly. What little they had was gone. Hunger became constant. Weakness began to set in. Water became the next challenge, but there was snow. And snow, if she could melt it, meant she could survive a little longer. She began collecting snow and bringing it into the van, melting it down to drink. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her alive. Without food, her body began to break down. Fat reserves disappeared. Muscle weakened. Energy faded. She grew thinner, colder, and increasingly exhausted. Time became difficult to measure. Days blurred together in a cycle of cold nights and quiet, empty days. The silence was constant. No passing cars, no voices, just wind moving through the mountains. At some point, she began writing notes, simple messages documenting her situation. No food, no gas, waiting for help. There were records of what happened, a way to leave something behind in case no one ever found her alive. As the weeks passed, her physical condition worsened. She spent more time laying down, conserving energy, drifting in and out of consciousness. Every movement required effort. Every day became harder than the last, but she stayed with the vehicle. That decision, more than anything else, would save her life. After nearly 7 weeks, something changed. In the distance, there was movement. Hunters had entered the area. They weren't searching for her. They had no idea she was there. It was pure chance. But they saw the van. When they approached, they found Rita inside, alive, but barely. She was severely malnourished, weak, and dehydrated, but she was alive. She was rescued and taken to safety. Her survival described as nothing short of remarkable. Nearly 50 days alone in the wilderness, sustained only by melted snow and the will to keep going. But Albert was still missing. Search efforts began, covering the vast and unforgiving terrain surrounding the van. The mountains were difficult to navigate, the landscape harsh and expansive. For months, there was no sign of him. Then, in 2012, more than a year later, his remains were found. He had traveled miles on foot, attempting to reach help. He didn't make it. Their story is often described as a GPS failure, but the truth is more complicated. The GPS didn't malfunction. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It found the shortest route between 2 points. What it didn't do was understand the reality of that route. It didn't account for terrain, weather, or the condition of the road. It offered a path, and they trusted it. In the very desperate time for decisions, both Albert and Rita did what they thought was best. Unfortunately, Albert's decision, though a brave one and with the best intentions, ultimately led to his death. Over a decade later, GPS has improved, and less of these unfortunate events have occurred. GPS now has a better mapping data, traffic and rerouting ability, user reports history, and route warnings. For Rita, she lived on and returned home to British Columbia, where she lived out of the spotlight and grieved the loss of her beloved husband.